Hey, everybody, Melissa McKenzie, publisher of the American Spectator, here on the Spectacle podcast with Scott McKay of Reviver.com, RVIVR.com, and of course,
So good at
a
that.
thank you.
So
And,
good.
and the contributing or senior editor, I can't remember what you're promoted to now, of the American Spectator. So it's been a crazy week. I can tell it's a crazy week. I've sat down twice. I've spent probably 12 hours pounding out a piece, 6 hours one time, 6 hours another time, and scrap both of them because I couldn't quite get a grasp on. Maybe talking through some of the issues that we're going to be talking through today, I'll be able to more clearly write something. But there's so many kind of streams going on, and in the culture right now, that I think I think we're in a real time, a change time moment. But before we get that, let's talk about Herschel Walker in Georgia. And David Catron wrote a piece going against all conventional wisdom yesterday. He said that he thinks Herschel Walker is going to win. And people are talking like it's a done deal, that is not the case, that Warnock is for sure going to win. And Catron laid out a pretty compelling piece. I was wondering what you think about this.
Well, and again, thanks for everybody, watching and listening. Do us a favor, smash that like button and hit subscribe, right? So you can get this thing, easily findable on your browser and when you show up on YouTube and everything else. On the Georgia election, I mean, I can tell you why, at least on the right, a lot of people are discounting the Herschel Walker thing. And there's a number of reasons. Number one, you haven't had this giant rush of people coming into Georgia to stump for Herschel Walker, right? I mean, I could have sworn Ron DeSantis was going to be all over that state. It would have made a lot of sense for him to do it. And if he went once, I didn't even know that he went once. Trump's doing like teletown halls in Georgia, which, that's been justified on the basis of he probably drives away more voters than he attracts over there. Of all of the states in the country, you could make the argument that Trump has been bad for the Republican Party. And it's not an argument I subscribe to, but I do think it's probably true in Georgia. I mean, it's just not been a good relationship for whatever reason. And I don't know that Georgia Republicans are necessarily anti-Trump people or anything like that. It's just mistakes have been made. And so I don't know that Trump has been in as much a position to help Herschel as you probably would have wanted him to be. I don't know that Herschel has really developed all that well as a candidate. But having said all that, Georgia is still a red state. You go look at that state legislature, and it is overwhelmingly Republican. You look at the statewide elected officials, other than the 2 Senate seats, I mean, they're overwhelmingly Republican. The congressional districts in Georgia are overwhelmingly represented by Republicans. Republicans win most of the elections in Georgia. So, you've got an enormous amount of out-of-state money coming in for Warnock. Walker has actually raised more money in-state in Georgia than Warnock has, which, so in other words, and I think one of the best arguments for Herschel is the fact that Raphael Warnock is a basically political colony of New York and LA. Speaking in an accent that sounds like Georgia, but not for policies that Georgians are for. And then the other thing is it's really been very unfair, the fact that people have gone on and on and on about how, Herschel Walker's got all these skeletons in his closet, these negatives and whatever. And then you look at Warnock, and Warnock is a disaster. I mean, the guy's a disaster. He is a for different reasons. Raphael Warnock is similar to John Fetterman. It's not that he's a stroke patient or any of that, but he makes absolutely no sense when he talks policy at all. And there's all these things in his background that are disqualifying. And for whatever reason, none of that gets reported in the mainstream media for sure. And I mean, this guy has completely skated. Of course, Democrat politicians skating in the mainstream media is it's not even controversial anymore. Like, we've given up complaining about what a free ride these guys have gotten. And of course, that's been the case for a long time, but it's specifically been the case for the last 15 years or so, when, Barack Obama came on the scene and was not vetted at all by the mainstream media, and everything that should have disqualified that guy was kind of swept. Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. And then you find out that all of it is true, other than him being born in Kenya. He wasn't born in Kenya, he was born in America, but basically everything else that should have made him completely unelectable, was swept under the rug. And that's being done with Warner. Now, I don't know if Catrone is right. I hope he is. I think the fundamentals of politics in Georgia should make him right, but yet I always thought, well, if you're within 2 to 3 points in the polls as a Republican candidate, you're probably going to win because of all the shy Republican voters out there. The problem is the last 2 cycles have largely disproven that. There's all these ballots that show up and they kind of overwhelm the shy Republican voters that turn out on election day. So we'll see. I mean, they did pass, some election integrity stuff in Georgia that in other races has definitely made a difference, so that you would think, okay, Fulton County can't just count ballots until their guy wins, anymore. But, we'll find out tonight. And, I have a hard time being optimistic about much of anything in American politics, particularly where it comes to federal elections, because, the system has been compromised and Republican politics is not up to the moment as it should be, either on the establishment side or on the Trump side.
I don't think they want to be. I don't think McConnell wants to win the seat. I don't think he wants a 50-50 Senate. I mean, look at what they have been doing since the election, passing bills that are absolutely anti-American.
Very few Republican voters are for any of this,
and no Republican voters want it.
That's right.
And, appealing to a tiny, tiny, minute sliver of the population and really jamming something down the Americans' throat that they don't want. And this is the Republican Party. This is Mitch McConnell, basically squandering any faith that the voters have in him. And I don't know how you feel, but if the Georgia voters feel the way I feel, which is screw you people, I'm just sick of it. You're going to keep doing this. Why? I might as well have a Democrat. I might as well have, that kind of.
Well, this is.
But I think this is a legit feeling.
Yeah, no, and this has been the problem on the Republican side since 1988. This has been the problem since Reagan went away, is that you have a Republican establishment, and I talk about Bush Republicanism and Mitch McConnell, and to a lesser extent, Kevin McCarthy, who I think could be reformed into something better than that.
Kevin McCarthy
doesn't have a lot of principle, and maybe he can see the, stick his finger.
He was at the White House this week. He was at the White House.
I get it. I'm not making a defense of McCarthy. I'm just saying he's not as bad as McConnell. But McConnell is really the exemplar of this, and his little lieutenants in the Senate that can't wait to vote with Democrats on bills that the Republican voting base cannot stand. And these guys, this is the thing. As a Republican, you can say, okay, so where we're moving in America is that the ballots of dead people will be harvested to elect politicians who are then going to ban Christian pastors from refusing to officiate gay weddings. And this will happen with the acquiescence of the Republican establishment. And you can tell me whether, as a Republican voter, it's worth my time to step out and vote for somebody who is not going to specifically say, hey, send me to Washington or wherever, and I will make sure that this does not happen. Okay. I will use every legislative trick in the book to make sure that these people can't pass this. If you're not articulate enough to say, okay, I'm going to convince you that this is who I am and who you can elect to the Senate or to Congress or whatever, then you're right. There is no reason to vote for somebody like that. And I'm not saying that Herschel's not that guy. I think Herschel probably is that guy. Problem is he's not articulate enough to make people believe it.
I don't think, the thing is, people know what he's articulate enough that Mitch McConnell doesn't want him in the Senate. Okay.
That's fair.
He's articulate enough that the establishment guys are pretty sure they don't want a Christian, Bible believing, national name recognition man speaking out on behalf of traditional values.
Right.
That's a nightmare for
and somebody who's private sector accomplished and doesn't need a political
right.
job. Like Herschel Walker can lose this race tomorrow, and
Yes.
probably he will be
Right.
happier as a human being a week from now than if he wins.
Exactly.
Right. And, those are the kinds of people that a Mitch McConnell doesn't want to have any part of being in the Senate, because that guy's going to say, you know what, take this job and shove it. I'm going to do the right thing. And if I lose re-election, I'm not even run for re-election. Those are not the kind of guys that Mitch McConnell wants to have anything to do with. And every single one of them on the Republican side who ran, he did everything he could to screw them up and make sure that they didn't win. Whether it was Kelly Tshibaka, whether it was Bolduc, where it was Blake Matthews or Blake Masters, you name it, like those guys all fell short, and it was all because they were grossly outspent by their opponents. And in the case of Tshibaka, she was grossly outspent with Mitch McConnell's money by Lisa Murkowski, who is probably going to die in office, 3 terms from now when she's 114 years old, because the GOP establishment, can't quit her, while the people of Alaska are disgusted with it.
Yeah.
And so why should we be disgusted with the establishment?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that we have a suburban voting class who doesn't want to, la, 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 who their whole world. And it's tough, right? It's tough to recognize where we're at as a country, where the Republican Party is at, that it's so debased, and it's so debased itself, and it's fighting for things that even 10 years ago would be horrifying. And that
this is a phenomenal segue into our next topic, which is the Twitter files, right?
Right. So you have people in the establishment, left and right. I'm sorry, they're all on the same side. Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, these boomer pieces of crap, are all on their own side. They choose themselves over party, and they choose themselves over country. And they have consistently done it to enrich themselves. They've Dianne Feinstein selling us out to China, having spies on her staff and knowing it. And just, these are not good people. What Joe Biden was doing in China and Ukraine is not atypical. This is the typical. So then you have that power married to corporate power. We see it with Disney. We see it with Twitter and and Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg. The Democrats come to him and say, "Hey, Mark, you have a choice here. Either help us get elected, or you can be investigated." And so he's got $75 billion, or he did, and what's 200 million into a political race versus what could happen. And so you have all of this unholy alliance between the business and the government, and we see it come out. What's interesting, and my son Spencer was looking at some New York Times articles in 1929, and they were basically pro whatever evil thing was happening at the time. And he said, "Have they ever been good?" And I was like, "Nope." No. And never. But the thing is, it's gotten worse. It's gotten more obviously connected, and it's gotten quicker. And it's easier, ironically, in the digital age to quash stories than it used to be. If people were handing out like little alternative rags throughout New York City, which was, the New York Post at the time, people were still reading the opposing point of view. But now everybody gets their news digitally. And so when Twitter talks to the CIA, the FBI, the whatever, the actual Biden administration officials, and we know that this is happening because Jen Psaki does not want to talk about it because she's being deposed about this very thing. And then there's no chance, and free speech is gone. And here's my thing. We'll get to this in a minute. But I don't think that Elon Musk is going to be any better. If he's better, it's going to be marginally better because all of the pressure points are there for the government to absolutely obliterate business. And so what the government is doing right now is they're investigating his company Starlink. They're looking into that and Neuralink, all of his brain stuff, which frankly scares me. So whatever. But
I'm not going to defend the Neuralink thing. The Starlink thing is really bad. And there's the reason for this is, remember, Starlink makes all of the billions of dollars in federal money that has been dropped out of helicopters to promote rural broadband. Okay.
Yep.
All of that is up in smoke, wasted money. All of these connected companies that got this federal, swag to come in. Oh, we're going to do rural broadband. Like those guys will end up with zero customers because it's going to be better internet, cheaper, really, with more service attached to it through Starlink. And
Right.
so this is going to put an entire sector of people who have given big money to the Democrat Party. This is going to put these guys out of business. So don't think for 1 second that they won't come up with all kinds of reasons to screw Elon Musk's business on Starlink. And the thing of it is that you've already started to see some of this, right? They hit him up. Oh, the price of poker is $20 million a month for you to provide free internet to the Ukrainians while this war's going on. And he's like, hey, when's this going to be over? Because this is getting expensive, right? And he says, maybe I should make peace. And what did he get? He got an F-bomb in his face from the Ukrainians. Yeah. You are the most ungrateful people on earth. But remember, before you get mad at Zelensky or any of his people, understand that Zelensky is a puppet. Zelensky speaks for the Democrat machine that runs Washington, D.C. Yeah. He is their guy. They installed him in power pretty much. They have paid him handsomely. They've given him weapons. They've given him everything under the sun. And he is not in a position to say anything that they don't like said. So when he says this stuff, and when his ministers and his minions go out and say this kind of stuff, okay, they're speaking for Team Biden.
Right.
And so this was Team Biden telling Elon Musk, F you, when he said, hey, maybe we should make peace between the Ukrainians and the Russians. All right. And this has put him, and look, Elon Musk is a liberal. All right. I mean, he's not a leftist like most of today's Democrats are. He's a liberal. He's in the Joe Rogan, Barry Weiss mold. All right. And all of a sudden, this guy has become, I wouldn't call him a conservative hero, but he's like thrust into our side because he actually believes in the tenets of the founding of America. And he may not even be all that good a guy. What I will say is this, at least right now, and I think his mentality might shift over the next 6 months when he realizes just how bad things are that he's got both feet into. I actually think that he is going to make a big difference with Twitter and with the basic foundations of free speech in America. For how long, I don't know, because they're going to make him pay an unbelievably heavy price for what he's doing. And of course, Tesla is and I'm not dependent on federal government, okay? But Tesla is somewhat dependent on the market having use for electric vehicles. And I don't know if you saw this, but GM is like saying, yeah, we're going to get out of the electric car market because we're getting killed on this deal. Either they're ceding that to Tesla and that's good news for Tesla, or it's exceedingly bad news for Tesla because what it means is that electric vehicles as a whole are just not going to make it. So if I was advising Elon, I'd tell him, make sure you build a car with an internal combustion engine too, just to be sure.
Well, the thing is, he doesn't
come up with something that you can hang your hat on if this whole EV thing dies off. But the other thing is SpaceX, right? Which is a NASA contractor. And even though what SpaceX is doing is putting up Starlink satellites, and that's like the part of SpaceX that nobody really gets, right? And he's done a really good job. Like, oh no, we're going to take people to Mars and we're going to do this. That's not really what this is. What this is him putting up thousands of little satellites that have become a network for Starlink that ultimately he's going to, be in a position to put all the cable companies out of business and all the internet providers out of business because his service is going to be really good, really fast, really cheap, and they can't really touch it. And it's brilliant. And the neat thing is he's done almost no PR about Starlink.
Right.
So he's flown in under the radar. But the problem is, all of that stuff can get completely whacked if the federal government decides to go hard enough at him. And him running, Twitter and outing this whole Twitter files thing on Friday was breathtaking in terms of how bold it is and how, I'll give him credit for how principled it is. But I mean, you have absolutely poked the bear.
Well, he said, and people are like, that's weird, but he said, I am not suicidal.
Right.
So he knows
you have to say these things because you end up dead.
Right.
And they go, oh, yeah, it was just, autoerotic asphyxiation or whatever. They'll come up with something.
That's the favorite. It seems to be the favorite CIA way of getting somebody to go. Where nobody will ask questions and everybody's too weirded out to say anything. But
right. You never know. You never know. But I mean, the whole point is that there have been way too many examples of this to not at least have some, element of trepidation about, this kind of stuff. I mean, the one that comes to mind, the most obvious is like Jeffrey Epstein, right? Who, of course, he didn't freaking hang himself. I mean, there's no way that happened, and yet it did. And then you know why? Which is, Jeffrey Epstein could have said, "Well, let's see who was on my plane. This guy and this guy and this guy and this guy." And I mean, that couldn't be allowed to come out. And and Elon Musk is putting himself in a situation where, he now has that kind of information. So, he needs to be very, very loud and obnoxious about how big his dead man switch is.
Yeah.
Because, what he's doing is agitating a whole lot of,
very wealthy, very connected people who very much have a lot of information to protect. I mean, I was thinking about, Nancy Pelosi's husband, unscathed, by the way, was at the ceremony for the national award or whatever Biden was doing with, Clooney and the rest of them. Gladys Knight.
Remarkable recovery that guy made. Remarkable.
Oh, he was hit by a hammer in the head like 4 times, according to everything, and he looked
stoved in,
and he's old. Yeah, and he looks fantastic. It's a modern miracle. These people are shameless. And so we see them like this, and we're supposed to forget that he greeted the police in his underwear. The NBC host who talked about that accurately, by the way, still hasn't been heard from.
Gone.
He's just poof, gone. And this is in the media regarding like what's going on with the Hunter Biden, what was revealed with the Twitter things, which was just scraping the surface because Musk said that Taibbi had part of it, and then Barry Weiss is going through a bunch of it too. Like there's just a ton of information to go through before the complete report comes out. And so, but the mainstream media is acting like, oh, that's old news. Wait a minute, this is news you've never covered.
Right.
And
well,
so
that's the game, right?
Oh,
which is we're going to suppress it for as
right.
long as we can. And then when we can't suppress it anymore, we're going to dismiss it because, well, that's not news. That happened a long time ago, right? Like that is literally the game. And I mean,
right.
This is fifth or sixth major thing that they've treated this way, which is, you shut everybody up about it, until people know a little something, but they don't know the details because you suppressed it. And then when all the details come out and they're as explosive as hell, you say, it's an old scandal.
Right.
They did that with Fast and Furious. They did it with the IRS scandal. I mean, Benghazi, they've done it a million times, and now they're trying to do it with the Hunter Biden thing. I don't know that it'll work this time because it's like literally that bad. And because it's of a piece with things that now, I mean, this business in Arizona with the election, it's really hard to make the case that the 2020 election was not stolen in very significant ways. Okay. And that we don't have a usurper in the White House right now. It's very difficult to make, anything other than that case. Okay.
It doesn't matter really though.
Obvious. Well, it doesn't matter in that
we have people who don't care. We have to face the facts, Scott. We are not in the country we were in a generation ago. The American people do not care enough. They certainly they don't care. They if they did, they would be doing different things. And so it's good enough. And so they will sit there and take it. I mean, I wrote about, Bill Clinton and needing like blue dress proof. We have blue dress proof now. We've had it with this Hunter Biden. And like I keep repeating, the FBI had this a year before the primary.
Yeah.
So and of course, Nancy Pelosi knew, and they kept it quiet anyway.
Well, I mean, that's to your point. That's the really amazing thing, is that this was possessed in Democrat circles, because we know that the FBI is nothing but a partisan hack operation for the Democrat Party. We know that. I mean, like that can't even be argued anymore. Mm-hmm. So everybody in the Democrat Party already knew about this.
Yeah.
And they still said Joe Biden's going to be our nominee, and fixed the primaries to make that the case. Yeah. Which is no longer like if we keep the Hunter Biden stuff quiet, he's the guy who can win. That's not what this is about, okay? Because the other candidates wouldn't have agreed to that, okay? The other candidates would have gotten together. Where this really is scary is the fact that that decision was made and everybody abided by it, knowing that the Bidens were bought off by the Chinese, okay? And, look at some of who these other candidates were, who probably should have stood up and said, anybody but Biden, A, this stuff is going to lose us the election, and B, it's unconscionable to have somebody that's this corrupted and this compromised as our nominee. I mean, the only reasonable conclusion you can come to is that they're all just as compromised. Okay.
Well, I think
the Eric Swalwells and the Kamala Harrises and all of the rest of these people that were running for president, like Joe Biden being compromised by China and Ukraine is not a thing for them, because they're also compromised.
Right.
Okay. And maybe it's not the same company or countries, and maybe it's, it's different elements that some of these people are on the payroll of. Some of your more doctrinaire socialists from way back certainly took money from the Chavez regime in Venezuela during the, back in the day. Mm-hmm. Cuba has played a role in some of these people for sure. So, it may have been that some of these guys are like, well, I can't really bring that up because I got skeletons in my own closet, right? And the mainstream media, which is going to protect me from those, may not do so if I come off the Democrat reservation, right? That is kind of how these things work. If you remember the old story about Saddam Hussein and how he came to power in Iraq, right? He had members of the Ba'ath Party kill other members of the Ba'ath Party so that they had just as much blood on their hands as he did.
Sure.
Right? That is kind of how you do it. It's how the Bolsheviks in the Soviet Union managed to, everybody's got blood on their hands. And so nobody's in a position to object to the really horrible things that get done. And those are the kinds of people that are now in charge of our country.
Yeah. On the right and the left. There's people who don't want to believe this. I'm going to bring it back again, but none of this happens without Mitch McConnell's approval, because in DC, Chuck Schumer's not that smart. Mitch McConnell is the kind of center linchpin this all turns around. And so when Trump got elected and upended this apple cart, Hillary Clinton and the media and everybody was so confident because they had the system rigged.
Right.
They didn't rig it enough.
Right.
And they didn't account for the fact that Hillary Clinton was just hated that much. So now they've really gone overboard in the rigging in 2020 and 2022. Which is why I think people on the left and in the media have been more quiet about the wins. There hasn't been a big celebration because everyone's uneasy, because everyone pretty much believes that this is BS. Yeah. And everybody's going, this ain't right. And so they're just like, if we're quiet as church mouses, no one will notice that we just stole everything, and that the candidate who had it stolen just certified her own election and threatened jail to people who didn't want to certify it because there were irregularities that needed to be checked. So, here we are, and that's in Arizona. And then we have, Herschel Walker coming up in Georgia, and people going, does the man even have a chance anyway? I mean, if you're a Republican, you have to wonder if even voting matters, which is the point, to demoralize people. And then more and more people come out, millions more come out for Republicans, and it's still not enough. And it lays bare this, toxic system. So, and then into all of this, Elon Musk wades with the Twitter files, and he's trying to retool Twitter. He's trying to make it more free and open. And then Kanye gets onto Twitter and he tests the system. Now, I have a bit of a different take than everyone. My first impulse was revulsion, right? Like my first impulse when Kanye was pulling a stunt was like, oh my goodness, this is so anti-Semitic. I am horrified. All right. I just was horrified. And then I sat there for a minute and I was like, he's using a symbol that's already been on Twitter, being used by evidently space alien people who think that they're, that symbol that he used. So it was already on Twitter. Those people haven't been bounced because, and it's a symbol that likely Musk would know because it's, space dorks and that sort of thing who were into it. And he was testing the limits of free speech. I am probably a voice crying aloud in the darkness because no one else agrees with me. I don't think Twitter should have banned. I don't think Musk should have banned Kanye. And the reason I don't think so is because what he's talking about needs to be aired out. Part of the problem we have right now in the country is that it's not like the people who believe these crazy things don't still exist. They're just being shunted off into darker parts of the internet. And some of this stuff needs to be aired out. So you wrote a piece today about and this is going to be a weird segue, people, so just hang in there, but I'm going to get there. You wrote a piece about Tiffany Cross, who got fired from, is it MSNBC? Yeah.
She had a Saturday morning show on MSNBC that was like bomb throwing hysteria nonstop. Megyn Kelly called her the most racist person on television.
Yeah,
and rightly so.
Right. I mean, she's
finally
just
MSNBC had enough and said, "Okay,
she's gone." Well, which is, illustrative of itself because normally, Joy Reid still exists and hasn't been fired yet. But so this woman gets fired and Kanye West has been canceled for all of the crazy crap he's said about Jewish people and that he's an anti-Semite and everything. He put the icing on the cake with saying that on Alex Jones, even Alex Jones, I watched a clip, Alex Jones is like, whoa, saying that he loved Hitler, he loved everybody. And then he compounded it last night. He went on to another show and said that
Jewish people need to forgive Hitler, and it's like,
they need to forgive
stop.
Hitler.
Just stop.
Get over it. But okay, so I'm listening to all this, and at first I was like, that's it. But then I was like, wait a minute. Kanye West is a performance artist first and foremost.
Right.
He is a performer. He has the world's attention. And this is what I think the political people don't realize. One of him is worth 100 slavish, slovenly, slobbering media people on their knees for the Democrats. He is pushing the whole argument. What can be said and what can't be said. He reminds me of a child testing their limits at a certain age. Can I put my finger in the socket here? Can I do this here? And I feel like he's like, wait a minute, we can say this about, and people are like, why is Nick Fuentes, who people call a racist, and Kanye West together? What is it that those two guys have in common? Well, they both have Christian ideology as a core tenet, and they both are absolutely for free speech, and they both are identitarians. So,
and to be fair, they're both um, attention hogs, right?
Well,
Like they're
that's exactly
people who do things to get publicity and get
right.
attention. That's
Right.
like their
Outrageous.
primary skill overall. Everything they do is
Right.
to rile people up and get attention.
Get attention. And they've succeeded. So we ended up in this inane place where we have these guys who are, in my opinion, functioning as court jesters. They're revealing the nakedness of all the elites in charge. So, Elon is saying he's for free speech, but if he's dumping Kanye for this, which Kanye's playing fast and loose, but he's not threatening anybody, not really. You can't, it's a difficult argument to make, and it's certainly one that wouldn't hold up in court. Not in the old America. Now, I don't know. In the new America, maybe they'd throw Kanye in jail because he's speaking freely. But he is no more inciting something than Eminem was inciting, violence against mothers in his raps, which he was accused of, years ago. Or video games are inciting violence. Okay. He's provocative. Sure. So my opinion is, don't ban him. Let people block him. Let people ignore him, but don't ban him. Now, Elon can do what he wants. It's his thing. But I do think in that one fell stroke, he undermined his free speech. So the speech is not free. You and I can't say what we want. Your piece at Reviver, which is a little edgy and provocative, I challenge you to do a Twitter thing going, and really going after Tiffany Cross, and people are going to be all over you like white on rice, calling you a racist.
Probably.
But we can say that all white people are this. We can say there's certain things we can say, right? But there's certain things we cannot say. And this is one of the things Kanye is getting angry about, and what he has in common with Fuentes. And my concern is they're right. Because of identity politics, because of critical race theory, because of the way speech coding has happened over the last 10, 15 years with social media, where more and more things you can't have said, which we used to all just talk about in conversation in our homes freely. Black people, white people, everybody friends with each other, but we can't have them publicly. We can't talk. So it means there's a whole class of things we cannot talk about. Honestly, we can't talk about the abuses of the American people by our media system, where we're just getting filth poured onto us from Hollywood and not expecting it to affect the culture. We can't have discussions about crime in cities and homelessness or whatever, because it's impolitic to notice who is committing these crimes. And because we can't talk about it because it's racist, if we talk about it, we can't solve it. Freud said that the cure is in the diagnosis. Well, if you can't even have a discussion about what might be the causative thing, and Charles Murray put up with this with all the things that he's written, which has gone against, all factual, by the way, scientific and true. But we can't have a conversation scientific and true about COVID. So truth itself is put on the menu. And I think this is what Kanye and Fuentes have in common, even if they're both outrageous. What can we can say this. We can, no problem, we can say this, but we can't say this. Well, I want to be able to say whatever I want. Otherwise, I'm not a free man. And that's true. Most of the people.
All of that, it's a very fair point. And I think that Elon put himself in a very difficult position. Well, he was put in a difficult position to begin with, because when Kanye said the stuff that he said about, the Jews, it put, right. I mean, you're Elon Musk and you're like, okay, so this is the most inconvenient thing. I just took this thing over. And I'm trying to put this thing together as a free speech medium. I've got this guy, you can at least make a credible argument, abusing this before he's been able to reset Twitter as a, look, we're going to do free speech here, and hate speech is not going to ultimately survive as a viable means of communication because it's going to get rejected by the audience, right?
Right.
More so than, but it's also new and it's still out there. And from a business standpoint, when he's got all these people already threatening to pull advertising and all the rest of this kind of stuff, and here he is trying to say, no, if you trust people, they will, with the ability to say what they want, you will reach an equilibrium that people can. It's when somebody puts their foot on the scale that this stuff starts going wrong. And then along comes Kanye West to do this. It's like, oh my God, this is so bad for business. I can't afford this right now. Like, I get it. I don't think it was a good decision, but it might have been the least bad decision from the standpoint of a CEO. Okay.
Right.
Now, philosophically, you let it stand, and then you just kind of cover your eyes and say, okay, hopefully in a week from now this will back off, or at least he keeps talking, and eventually it's one of these where it's like, guys, should I pull him? Is it in his best interest for me to pull him? And that actually might be a thing, because I think you may have a really good point about how Kanye is testing the limits of what we're allowed to say. Kanye may also be completely mentally unbalanced as well. He may be like, I don't know enough about this guy to know what his mental state is, but he may be in need of an intervention. This guy might be bipolar. He might be a manic depressed. I mean, who knows? I don't know anything about his psyche. And so it might be that you got a guy who's completely off his rocker. And if he didn't pull him, God knows what might have come next. And we'll find that out off of Twitter, because people still want to interview Kanye West, and he's got a webcam too, and can say all kinds of things. And he keeps saying them, like noted last night, where he's, oh yeah, the Jews need to forgive Hitler, and it's like, no, okay, you can't say this kinds of stuff. Now the big thing that I have with Kanye though is this, where his basic point is, like, hey, I'm a black recording artist, and the Jews control the record industry. All right. And I don't know that he's necessarily wrong about that. Certainly when Dave Chappelle goes on Saturday Night Live and he does the opening monologue, which I haven't watched an opening monologue on Saturday Night Live in forever. And I see this and I couldn't stop laughing. Not wasn't enough to get me to watch Saturday Night Live again, but I'll certainly watch YouTube's of it if they're that good. But Chappelle was basically like, yeah, it's true, right? So my whole thing is this: if what Kanye is saying is true, and now he's going off on the Jews, it's like, dude, you do realize that if they control the record business and you got rich and famous in the record business, that those guys are your benefactor, and you should be grateful to them for allowing you to be rich and famous, and probably not beat up on the Jews. And it's like, okay, but I mean, these are not a malign influence, at least where you're concerned, because if they control the business and freeze people out, they didn't freeze you out. And you're like, at least before you decided to throw it away, you were worth $1 billion.
Well, the thing is, I think that I think there's multiple, and this is why I think there's multiple things going on here. Here's a guy, this is a black guy who thought, when I make $1 billion, when I have this much power, I'm going to be able to finally have freedom. I'm going to be able to say what I want. I'm going to be able to do what I want. And then the divorce happened. Life is falling apart. And he realizes that there are certain things that he cannot say, that the media is controlled by certain people, probably his ex-mother-in-law, that there are things that are beyond his control that he thought. And the other thing is, culturally, he sees Jewish people sticking together, although anybody who knows anything about like Israel politics or there's always,
that's not really a thing at all.
That's not really a thing. But from his perspective, it looks, in Hollywood, looks like a monolith. And he's like, why aren't black people standing up for each other like this? Where's this brotherhood? I think there's a lot of things going on here that he is reconciling. And I think it really bothers him most of all that he even with the money and power that he has, doesn't feel like a free man. And for an artist who wants to, speak freely, and I'm saying all of this, by the way, I was a Kanye fan way back, right? I've loved his music from the beginning. He is a musical genius. I don't care what anybody else says. He does things that other people cannot do. Um, I would suggest for anybody listening to me who hasn't heard his music to go just listen to it. And this is off of one of his first albums, a song called Jesus Walks. And anybody who's been a Christian knows the hymn, but to have how he deals with it, and then what he raps about in between the chorus line is really, and he's unbelievably prophetic, scarily prophetic. His words definitely have power, and he's influencing people. And I think the thing that concerns me is that I think that his message is landing, and that would make Elon want to, get him off Twitter, because it's like, but culturally he's going, wait a minute, are we even America anymore if we can't say what we want? Are we free? And who really has the power? And what happens is when there is an economic slowdown and there are, people feeling aggrieved, these messages can sound appealing. And so, I think it's dangerous for people not to be taking this seriously. I think that there is a strong undercurrent where, boys my son's age, plural, I have two of them, have only heard negative things about being a white male. There's never been a positive message from their institutions of learning, from all of the culture where white males are not persecuted. Well, what happens when the dominant race starts identifying by their race? Because they've been taught to do that because of critical race theory.
Right.
So we have people.
Yeah, the answer to that question is we saw it.
Right.
Germany in the 1930s. That is literally what you get when you have the majority of a country feels aggrieved,
right,
that a minority is taking advantage of. That's literally how you get what you got.
And that it wasn't. I mean, the fault of everything in Germany was in some ways external after World War I, and
but that's not how it was perceived.
But that's not how it's perceived, exactly. And so, if the economy goes south, which it's in contraction right now, which is alarming.
Yeah.
And this is where I think the keyboard class is completely out of touch. COVID didn't touch them. The .com bust didn't really touch them. The housing bust in 2008 didn't touch them. They just have had, been going along with 4% unemployment this entire time. But the lower and the middle class, working class people have taken it on the chin every single time.
Right.
And
they've gone from manufacturing jobs to fentanyl. I mean, that's right. That's basically
yes. And so and it's not so easy for them to just adjust, like these really obnoxious journalists saying, learn to code, when these coal workers lost their jobs. Meanwhile, now they're mad when people say that to them when they lose their jobs. Well, as the job losses mount, like in media, in technology, in these upper middle class jobs, as things shift and as everything contracts, Amazon's cutting, jobs. This is very dangerous. I'm really concerned about the fertile soil that is for this kind of divisive grievance. And we don't have an elite. They are enriching themselves so completely, so shamelessly, so exhaustively, and so right in the faces of everyone, that it's right there's a there will be a shock when the people revolt against this, but it shouldn't be a shock. This kind of this contempt for your own voter, contempt for your own people has existed really since Bush Sr. Ironically enough, he possessed of noblesse oblige out of the CIA, the kind of hoity-toity Republican, blue blood from the Northeast who was Reagan's Veep. And but there was always this kind of like, there, little poor person.
Right.
And I think that Kanye and Fuentes and a lot of these folks are going, and I'll tell you this, a lot of Black people are looking at Kanye and going, if it can happen to that man, none of us stand a chance.
Right. Well, and let me, I'm going to get into this Reviver piece about Tiffany Cross a little bit because it picks up on a lot of what you're talking about. So, and just so you know, the Reviver piece was actually going to be an American Spectator column because I guess her name is Karen Ataya, who is a columnist at the Washington Post on Sunday, wrote this whole thing about how awful it was that Tiffany Cross got fired at MSNBC. And it was all, I mean, she spoke out against white supremacy and look what she gets, right? And I like, just to make a quick interjection, you talked about what do you get when, when you get all this like entire generation of like white kids who never hear anything being, positive about like white people, right? Well, that same critical race theory stuff, okay, is toxic not just to white people but also to Black people as well, because you teach white kids that they come from oppressors, but you're also teaching Black kids that they come from oppressed, right? And so that's what you get with Karen Ataya, Tiffany Cross, Joy Reid, a lot of these other people that you are now bringing up this, entire class of folks who get elevated in the media. I mean, Karen Ataya, like her deal, if I remember it right, is she's, goes and gets a grad degree in journalism, right? Which anybody that gets a grad degree in journalism is just setting their parents' money on fire. And her dad's like a pulmonologist or some kind of crap like that. Anyway, she goes and gets a job working like in Trinidad and Tobago or something for the AP, and which is like an absolute nothing job. She does that for like 2 years, and then they pick her up at the Washington Post. All right. And she's got some nothing deal. Like she's on the editorial staff running the global opinions desk. And like her claim to fame is that she signs up Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah.
All right. Right. The kind of pro-jihad Saudi guy who ultimately.
How much do you think she was paid for that? How much do you think she?
I mean, it. But like, so the deal is like she signs him up and he writes a bunch of stuff for him, whatever, and pisses off the Saudi government enough that they kill him. And all of a sudden, Karen Ataya is like relevant for like a short period of time. She writes a bunch of stuff complaining about how he got killed and all this kind of crap. And like she gets the National Journalist of the Year award from the National Association of Black Journalists. And woohoo! Like Karen Ataya is a big star. That was 2019. 3 years later, nobody's heard her name again. She said she was going to write a book about her and Jamal Khashoggi. You go on Amazon looking for that book, and what you will find is an audio CD that HarperCollins put out, okay? Like the price is $45.23 for an audio CD, and then you look, it's like temporarily out of stock. I'm like, temporarily out of stock? Let's look at the rank on this. Oh, I can't even find a rank. So has it ever been in stock for $45.23? And this is like she's a journalist that has had 4 years to write a book about this subject that she got a National Journalist of the Year award for. And it's an audio CD that you can't even get. All right. So like, in other words, this is somebody who is a nobody. Okay. Right. It's a nobody. And she goes and she writes this piece about Tiffany Cross, whatever. And so like, I'm like, all right, well, yeah, I'll write about this. What am I going to write about? And so I call a friend of mine who is Black and female. And it's like, should I touch this? And she's like, not only do you got to write about this, here's what you got to say. And I mean, she launched into this like brilliant rant about how the media and the pop culture is elevating, and politics too, is elevating like, not like Black women per se, but like a specific class
Mm.
of Black women. Joy Reid, Tiffany Cross, Karen Ataya, like in politics, it's like the Latoya Cantrells and the Lori Lightfoots and the Muriel Bowsers and Maxine Waters and Sheila Jackson Lee. And she gave it a four-letter acronym, which is toxic Black female aggressors. And I'm like, holy shit, that's like, wow. And she's like, no, this is a thing, right? And for people who are, not of a political or activist bent, who just want to get along with folks, like it's a disaster to have the media elevate that.
Mm.
And she really was kind of incensed about the fact that Karen Ataya didn't so much by name attack Rashida Jones, who's the president of MSNBC,
Mm-hmm.
but like had this paragraph is like, it's especially damaging that Rashida Jones would have been the one to pull the trigger on Tiffany Cross. And what my friend was saying is like, go research who Rashida Jones is.
Right.
Because
right.
Rashida Jones came up from like local TV and I think Columbia, South Carolina or somewhere, took like a bottom feeder NBC station and in 3 or 4 years running it, turned it into the market leader. Then she got like the Weather Channel and like really boosted the Weather Channel. Like she's like somebody who's really accomplished by any definition of the word. Like she's taken jobs and made the things she's run better all along. Like if she was a football coach, she'd been somebody who'd like taken over a 3-9 college team and turned it in a 9-3 team and then moved on to another job, right? Like she's not somebody who just gets promoted because she's Black or female or any of that stuff. She's good, right?
Right.
And I'm saying this about somebody that runs MSNBC. Okay, like I'm not like looking to go give compliments to MSNBC people, but Rashida Jones is actually somebody who is credible in the decisions she makes. She looks at Tiffany Cross and says, oh my God, right? So my friend sees this and says, this isn't even about race. This is about what they're trying to do and who they're trying to elevate, right? And so you have Whoopi Goldberg on The View that never gets fired, even though she says fireable things all the time. You've got these, these mayors of these cities who are just disasters, but you can't criticize them. They fail up all the time. And so my friend is like, this is so toxic because there are so many people in the Black community that see that and are like, you know what? Our people just can't succeed because look at the people who like are supposedly successful. They're not, they're awful. And it's like, well, why aren't we getting, the positive feedback about people who are actually good at their jobs? I thought that was a pretty profound thing that she said.
Well, I'm curious because so I'm from Detroit originally, and one of my friends, her family moved down here from Detroit. She's Black. My experience with Black people has always been hardworking, married people, families, just like my family. We, but it was interesting because a friend down here said, well, everything that I see in the news is not that. Right. And so she's like, I've never known like a Black married couple. And that blew my mind because all I knew were Black married couples. Okay. And families.
Right.
And so I was thinking about that and how that would affect your perception. So my question here is it the same thing? Is it the same thing that is happening to white women, that these kind of, you can't tell me nothing type of women, and it's happening amongst white women too, where you
I think
see
it's
these
more
young...
pronounced among like who gets elevated in the media from a Black female standpoint, but that it's so often Black community, Black culture is like a leading indicator of what's coming. Right, particularly like it goes from Black to white really, really quickly, and we're seeing that kind of statistically across the board in all of these different sort of performance metrics societally, whether it's unwed childbirth or any of these kinds of things. Like you can definitely see, Black people tend to be a canary in the coal mine when it comes to culture, and particularly
so like what I read about this was that the reason that this is happening is economic, that they need women to be workforce participants And the thing is, a single mom who's running around taking care of her kids and whatever has a much more difficult time getting into, just because of her life stresses. And the same is true, by the way, of white women.
Yeah.
So like women trading in being a wife and a mother for being a secretary or being a waitress or being a housekeeper, whatever.
They're much
And
more exploitable economically. There's no
yes,
question.
much more exploitable. I had never made that connection. Now that might make me like an idiot until recently, where I was like, oh, this is the incentive. So women are still working at the pleasure of men. It's just they're doing it without any of the obligations that men have had toward women. Because instead of a husband, you have a boss, the boss man who doesn't give a crap about you and doesn't care about your kids. And I was like, wow, this is really a tool of Satan. This is not something that I even thought about. And you see
Okay,
the
well,
yes.
let me jump in and ask you this though, real quick, because I think I
Okay.
know the answer to it.
Yeah.
What was the thing that flipped your switch where you went, oh, because I'll bet I know.
I don't know. The thing that did it for me was the workforce participation after COVID. And I was looking at the data. And so I'm probably not the answer that you're looking at, but I was like, what's happening and why are we having so many fewer? And my anecdotal evidence in my life was that a lot of these working class women, their husbands were now saying, stay home. And if they could, they were.
Right.
And then I started digging deeper, and then I saw it. What were you going to say? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, because the thing that like really hammered it home, if you weren't already there, was when corporate America started talking about giving money to their female employees to go get abortions.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
Well,
that
that
was like,
confirmed it. Yeah.
whoa, like
Wow.
really?
Yeah.
I mean, that the exploitative relationship with respect to working women, I mean, it was undeniable at that point. If you're
Yes.
willing to go pay people, to kill their freaking own flesh and blood, because it's cheaper to do that than to have happy family oriented folks working for you. I mean, like anybody who's like a corporatist at that point, like
Yes.
check your soul at the door, because you're done. Right. And that, hopefully, and maybe the moment has passed, but hopefully things like this will ultimately make people start to realize how badly off the track we are societally when we actually tolerate corporate America doing manifestly evil things like that to their own employees that they're supposed to have some sort of fiduciary responsibility for. But I mean, what it ultimately comes down to, whether it's the sort of the take from this Tiffany Cross firing and this sort of, like elevation of this personality type and the damage that does, because like, for example, within the Black community, I don't know many Black guys out there, and can't really speak for this because I know a few Black guys, but they're not a representative sample per se. But I don't know how many Black guys find Joy Reid attractive. Forget about whether she's like physically attractive, like the stuff that comes out of her mouth. And it's like, hey, how'd you like that to be your wife back home? I can't imagine there are very many Black guys who are like, oh yeah, Joy Reid's great. They may like her on television a little, but they definitely don't want to have to wake up next to that every morning. Okay.
Somebody married, what's her face? Anna, she's a supposed ex-Republican on The View. Anna.
Yeah. Well, the one that Tiffany Cross beat the living hell out of and called her, like, I can't remember what the title was, but it was like this horrendous thing that she said about that one, and Tiffany Cross got fired. But I mean, whether it's Whoopi Goldberg or Stacey Abrams or I mean, LaToya Cantrell was married and she dumped that guy over, and now she's screwing the guy from the NOPD who's her security officer in a city-owned apartment on city time, and like they got the video to prove it's happening, and everybody in New Orleans is like, and it's, well, hey, this is what you get, right? I mean, it's not a surprise. We knew who this woman was when she first got elected, that she was like, one of these people that would do manifestly awful things. And if anybody called her on that, they were either a racist or a sexist. And that's how she got away with all this stuff that she did. And this happens over and over and over again. The point is, none of that is personally attractive. And you are promoting this in the media that, hey, this is who you should be if you want to get ahead in the world. And you don't get ahead in the world because you become toxic when you do that. And I mean, I go on and on about this in sort of a gender and sex construct. And I know, Melissa, you're probably tired of hearing about it, but like this kind of goes back to what Hollywood is doing with female protagonists in movies and TV, right? It's, girl boss who beats up the 250-pound men rather than promoting, hey, there are ways that females have gotten what they wanted in, history for thousands of years that don't involve so much as slapping anybody. I mean, like, there are skills that are very useful that are not represented at all in movies. And when girls think that they can go beat up a guy and get what they want, that's not the road to happiness, because it's not going to work out very well.
Well, okay, to your point. So there were years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago, I went to Netroots and they had a panel on superheroes. And this was before the big Marvel push, right? And I think at the time, can't remember if the movie was Salt, but they were talking about different, which was absurd because Angelina Jolie is like, could be broken like a toothpick, right? And so she's beating up all these guys or something. It's ridiculous. And I'm at the back of the room. I asked a question and I said, do you think it is good representation to have women be doing things in videos to men that are impossible unless you're Wonder Woman and you're a goddess, right? One of my girlfriends said to me, she goes, Wonder Woman, that's just so, that's unreal. I was like, she's a goddess. She's going to beat up guys. Okay. So we get that. That's okay. But when we're talking about like the average, girl boss that we're talking about, that woman is going to be destroyed. Do we really want to introduce the idea into the culture that women can beat men up when it's not true? And the women on the panel, it was all women. They were like, wow, we hadn't thought about that. And I'm like, because what you're doing is basically saying that it's okay for women and men to get into physical altercations, and women are going to lose that equation every time. Right. And so we have seen these kind of, Rey in Star Wars. I saw a really great thread about talking about the Mary Sue, where we have these women protagonists, modern ones, where the women are perfect, don't ever make mistakes, and have no character arc, as opposed to someone like Leia, who, was shaken, was, a prisoner, was made a slave and overcame, and had a natural story arc, but she was still a woman. Yeah. Right. Right. And so and still a princess. And so there's this kind of, I totally see this trope now. And I'm wondering, what do we do to undo this? Because if you interview young college girls, they are to a person brainwashed. First off, they don't understand how men think at all.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that in the last podcast.
Last one. And second of all,
find the second half of last week's podcast where Melissa goes into this, because it's really, really, really good.
Oh, well, that's kind. But I do think we can talk about these problems. I'm just wondering what the solution is. And
let me interject here, because I do actually, unless if you
I don't have one, so go for it.
All right. So last week I stumbled on, and it was actually a friend of mine who's a pastor, on Facebook, noted that there's a movie, I guess it came out early this year, called Redeeming Love. Okay. And it's, it's like, I think it was an Angel Studios release, or it was something, it's Christian things. And it's the biblical story of Hosea and Gomer. Okay. And if you don't remember that one, Hosea is the guy who marries a prostitute, and she leaves on him. And then she comes back, and she leaves again, and she comes back, she leaves again. He never stops loving her. All right. And it's one of these, and finally she comes home, and that's it. And they have a family and whatever. And she's like, but she was so broken inside that, she couldn't just flip the switch. So they took this story. Somebody had written a novel that basically kind of modernized the story a little, where it takes place in California during the gold rush. All right, and they made a movie off of the novel. And and I ended up watching the movie. Fabulous movie. I mean, it's like really well shot, and the story is good. I mean, it's like actually kind of a tearjerker. It's a very good movie. The Rotten Tomatoes audience score of this thing was 95. You know what the
Wow.
critics score was? 11.
Yeah.
Okay. So they made this movie. I don't know if it made any money, but the point is, like, this is how desperate the militant atheists and the anti-Christians and
Mm-hmm.
the wreckers of the culture that are in control of Hollywood, like went out of their way to trash this movie that there was nothing wrong with. It wasn't like the acting was bad. The acting was actually better than most of these Christian movies I've seen. The direction was good. The cinematography is terrific. I mean, it's kind of like a whole lot of nature shots of, like, the country in California, like really, really, really well done, I thought. But they went out of their way to make this out to be like the biggest bomb movie of all time. And the audience was
Mm-hmm.
like, bullshit, this is great. 95% score. All right.
Right.
What I would say is the answer is to overwhelm the system with redeeming loves. Okay. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to have the cultural content that backs up, um, the message. And it doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to be preachy propaganda shit. I mean, there's plenty of great stories out there that can be drawn on to reinforce the culture and the values that regular folks, I'm not even going to say traditional Americans, just regular folks, can sink our teeth into. As opposed to, and like these things, I guarantee you, because I know they didn't spend a whole lot of money making Redeeming Love. I don't know what it made. I guarantee you it made a profit. On the other hand,
Oh,
you
yeah,
have,
yeah.
because all of these Christian movies do. I mean, they spend like $1 million or $2 million and they make 80. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as opposed to, for example, Strange World that Disney put out, where they're going to lose $100 million. Okay. This thing had $180 million production and marketing budget. And the first weekend it did 18 million. Okay. Like, they're going to take a freaking bath on this movie because it's gay propaganda. All right. And it's not the first time that Disney has done this. They've done it over and over and over again, and they lose money every single time. So much so that that making money is no longer what motivates these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. All right. But there is a massive hole in the market when these guys deliberately make movies that nobody wants to see, or TV shows or whatever, or any kind of cultural content nobody wants to see. The moviegoers are still there. Okay, the audience is still there, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody bitches that there's nothing on TV, right? So the answer is, okay, fill that void with stuff that actually reinforces people's values. And it
Have
doesn't
you
even
seen
really have to be that good, so long as it's affirming in some way, shape, or form to normal folks. They'll say, you know what, it might not have been the best movie I ever saw, but at least I wasn't offended for 2 hours, and they will watch it.
Okay, have you seen yeah, I think that's a good answer. And it brings the me back to what uh culture is before politics. So the culture has to change. I just finished the
Breitbart
book
said
Piece of
that,
Soul.
right?
Yeah, right. Bright Andrew said that. Piece of Soul, which was written by Fulton Sheen, talks about he's a Catholic priest from, all you older people will know who he is.
Yep.
But he was talking about fixing the internal space of people, and then the politics and the external space changes. Have you seen any of The Chosen, the
Yeah, I'm watching
TV
season 2
series?
right now.
Okay, so I'm all caught up. I took my kids to the theater to watch season 3, the first 2 episodes. They had a theater event, and it
Right.
did so well. They held it over in theaters,
That made
and
more money the first weekend than Strange World did.
did it.
Yes, it
See,
did.
that's such good news
Two
because
TV episodes that you can stay home and watch for free
watch.
did better box office than Strange World did.
But the production values are off the
Yeah, they're
charts with
great.
this. The writing is great. The acting's fantastic. It's just
That the guy
beautiful.
that they, I don't know what the guy's name is, but the guy they cast as Jesus in
Yeah.
The Chosen, there's something about this guy's eyes. I saw it's
Yeah.
like they were born to play Jesus because the guy's eyes
Yes.
just have this kindness to him.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You almost feel like it's like CGI or something that they've kind of altered it.
No, it's
Nobody
just
can
him.
have eyes like this poor guy, like this guy has. That like
Yeah.
when he looks at the camera, you're like, that had to be what
He's
Jesus looked like.
Catholic too, he's Catholic. And the
It's it,
Pope,
it's fascinating because you're watching like
yeah.
I totally believe this guy as Jesus, like
Oh,
totally
yes.
believe it.
Have you gotten to the scene yet? I don't want to ruin it, where Mary Magdalene has a um, sinful episode, let's say, after she's been saved. No, okay, I don't want to ruin it.
That's in season 2 that I haven't gotten. I think
Yeah, okay.
season 2.
There is, it's just so beautiful. And I do think, and this is all, if you'll notice, like the mainstream media, this is a phenomenon.
Oh
This
yeah.
is a new way to finance movies,
What is
new
it, like
way to finance.
$370 million that Angel Studios has crowdfunded the
They've
Chosen? I guess
crowdfunded,
some of their
yes,
other projects as well. I mean, it's like off the charts. And the thing of
yes,
it is, and I mean, nobody in Hollywood wants to talk about this. We talked about this the last podcast. It's like, so the Angel Studios people have crowdfunded $370 million or whatever it is for The Chosen. And
right,
Hollywood is going to get money from China and the drug cartels in Mexico to finance their movies,
right,
right?
yeah,
Like which one do you think has a better future as a going concern, right? Like sort of this budding
hmm,
Christian film industry versus the people that make Strange World and
hmm,
Bros and all of these like
hmm,
Hollywood these Oscar bait movies that all debuted like the weekend of Thanksgiving, and
right,
every one of them did like $2 million.
right,
What is it, Call Jane or whatever, it was like the abortion movie and all that.
right.
Nobody wants to watch
The,
any of that crap. Like nobody wants to watch it.
no,
It has
right.
zero entertainment value. It's left wing propaganda, and that's it. And like there is no, even left wing partisan people are like so full up with that content that they won't even go out and support those movies,
Well,
right?
the interesting thing is like with The Chosen, is the actors are like actors who've been in other things. Some of them have been in like Hollywood productions, and how much joy they have. Like you see them interviewed, and
It's
they've reached out.
really like
I'm
you're
on.
right. That's a really like it's palpable.
So yes,
They
and
actually
so
believe it. It's like I finally believe in a project that I'm working on.
right, they know they're doing something objectively good for people, and not harming them. And so like that's very heady stuff, I think, for an actor to be playing. First of all, iconic parts, right? Like, you're getting to
Right.
go down in history as one of the most important people ever who's been characterized in writing ever. So, I
Right.
mean, that's heady stuff. But I'm excited for the future, and it's interesting to me that the mainstream media isn't talking about this. I'm on their media list, and they have sent different things for interviewing some of the actors. I think we should have invite
Yeah, I'd
them to
love that.
come onto
That'd
our
be great.
show.
Well, and
Yeah.
interestingly enough, it's been a couple of weeks since I've seen anything about it. There's another project that Angel Studios is now doing crowdfunding for, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's like kind of a sci-fi thing, where like this guy basically gets to he's down on his luck, his life stinks, whatever, and he meets Satan, who basically tells him, "Look, I can fix all of your problems, right?" And the guy is like initially really against it, but he gets in a situation where he's like, "You know what? Maybe I will," right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just kind of it shifts like everything in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And they just did like a I don't know 5 minute short film version of it as
Oh,
sort of
I'll
a
have to look
teaser to
for it.
attract investment, and it like off the chart. I think if you go to Angel Studios website, you can probably find it.
Okay.
But I mean, and we may have to. we have to bring that back up next podcast and talk about it some more, because it was really, really an interesting, it's kind of a mix of sci-fi and sort of a Christian film theme that I thought was, really creative, and was it was interesting, and okay, like this is a Christian filmmaking, production company that is willing to sort of branch out. I mean, we know them because of the biblical stuff that they're doing, but branching out into sort of the larger culture to actually infuse the values and the message of a Christian perspective into some of these other genres. Like,
well,
that
here's
to
the
me is
thing.
the future. Like that is how you reclaim the culture, is to do it better than, the other side, which is lost, cannot tell a compelling story anymore because they are so woke and so just completely slaves to this null value set that is dominating Hollywood. And kind of getting back to Kanye, like his big complaint and concern that I don't think he did a good job of articulating is not that the Jews control the record industry. It's that the record industry, like all of this other stuff in Hollywood and the culture, is controlled by a very small number of people. And that control is centralized. And they tell you what you can say and what you can't. It's decided by a closed circle of folks that you can't break into, even if you're Kanye West. Right? If he'd have said it that way, I think he would have gotten like universal agreement, because everybody knows that, even though they won't necessarily talk about it at parties. And he got,
they can't, because
sidetracked talking about the Jews when that's not really I mean, most of these people may very well be Jewish. Okay. Like that, that I think may be a thing, but that's not what's important here. What's important is it's a small number of people who share the same personal philosophy, political philosophy, and love of power, above all other things, that really is the problem.
Well, and the thing is like anything in America, when you get too much of a monopoly, something will pop up. And it's interesting. I don't know about you, but I've always been like biased against like Christian music, Christian art, because it's always kind of stunk. And so people were talking about The Chosen for a year before I was like, somebody was, browbeating me, Melissa, you got to watch this. And I was like, yeah. Finally watched it on my phone. And then I binged the whole thing over a weekend. Like, I wasn't sleeping. I was watching the whole thing.
My experience was similar.
I was like, I'm an idiot. This is fantastic entertainment. And it's also really, my oldest son is a bit of a biblical scholar, but he was like, Mom, I'm not sure if that happened. I was like, no, we don't know. They're filling in some story gaps,
Right.
And, so, having that conversation, but being able to share something unapologetically, and there's some hardcore stuff is coming, this is hardcore stuff is coming. And I really hope that they continue into the, the travels of like Paul and Barnabas, and, really get into the Roman,
you've got the entire foundation of a church, and like all the, the letters from Paul's letters and all the rest of that stuff that absolutely, all of the apostles' stories. I mean, all of that is
compelling.
Not only is it compelling, but it's like, it's ground that's not really all that well trodden.
No, I mean, nobody's talked about it, but it's so important. And then the thing is like, I'm like, are they going to get into how each one of the apostles are killed? I mean, this is hardcore crap. Like, this is like rated R stuff. So I don't know what's going to happen, but like, I'm curious to see, and I'm just excited.
Well, compare that story to like, okay, how many sequels of bad movies to begin with is Hollywood going to, oh, let's do some more Marvel and Avengers. Like, yeah. And that's all played out and done. All right. And all this is just beating that dead horse some more to see if some money falls out. Right. Like, there's no more creative juices flowing on any of that stuff. Whereas here you've got all of this biblical stuff that hasn't been touched in a generation or more. All right. And like, some of the stories haven't been touched at all. Like, I mentioned Redeeming Love. I guarantee you 3/4 or more of the people that are watching this podcast be like, Hosea and Gomer? And they're like, now going to go back and Google it and find out, like, I don't know anything about that. And it's like, okay, I mean, if this is not it's not one of the most well-known stories in the Bible, I get it, but it is actually a really good story to tell about somebody that, look, love is unconditional and love supports people, all this kinds of stuff.
You know what has surprised me is there has not been, this is my pitch to Hollywood, this Angel Studios, if you're listening, this is what I want to do. I shouldn't say, should I say the idea out loud? Because I think it's a great one, but no one has done a modern version of Saul and his son Jonathan, David and his sons Absalom, and all of that, and all of the political manifestations, and set it like I see it in a business setting where an empire is
absolutely,
in a hostile takeover, and then literally hunting the guy. It would happen, and I just think
you could half the Old Testament you can put it, because the values and the lessons and the human nature and all of that kind of stuff is like, it's intact. Taking it out of that and putting it in a different setting, like those are the kinds of things that I've been waiting for conservative filmmakers and Christian filmmakers to like get into. And I think there's been sort of this, like reticence to live in the modern moment, right? And then there's, well, we're going to talk about something 2,000 years ago, and is it really relatable? And are we going to put money into this? And I think you're finally beginning to see a little, sort of the maturation of a conservative film industry where, they are willing to take the lessons that, and this is all stuff that like old Hollywood, when it reflected American values and traditional Western values, would commonly do. I mean, Cecil B. DeMille was making like big biblical stories with thousands of extras and all this kinds of stuff.
Right.
And like making a spectacle out of the Bible, right? Like the Ben-Hurs and, I mean, I could rattle off all of those DeMille movies, but like they used to make, those were summer tentpole movies, right? I mean, they built Hollywood on a lot of that stuff. Charlton Heston as Moses and like then completely got away from all of that and opened that space wide up for somebody else to come along and do it. I mean, if somebody were to do Charlton Heston as Moses, like if Angel Studios did it or whatever, like, that every church in America would be like, okay, Sunday service this week is at the theater, and they would fill that place up. And I mean, it would be a $1 billion movie like that when the churches got involved. You saw what happened with Passion of the Christ, which was a little on the edgy side, right? If somebody were to do a DeMille remake of the 10 Commandments or whatever, okay, and not from this kind of Hollywood Gnostic freaking awful perspective like they did with Noah and all of that, but somebody like really, okay, we actually love these stories and we're gonna do like a big budget thing. First of all, you'd get the money raised for it. I mean, you could do
Noah modernly. You could do Noah sci-fi with him taking his family and all the animals and all the seeds and whatever in a spaceship, right? And
like,
I mean, there's just so many ways.
Here's a black hole or something, and if you pilot the spaceship through that, here's this is another planet. Like, like that story could be done,
right?
Okay? And Noah is a Elon Musk type figure,
right? Who everybody thinks is crazy.
He's like a born again Christian or some kind of deal like that. Yeah, you could make a story like that,
right?
And go and do, and it would be a like automatic hit. Okay, automatic hit. People will go and see Avatar. Okay, as idiotic and stupid as all that is. You're gonna make $1 billion on that garbage. Something like this, if it's not awful, it's gonna make at least $200-300-400 million. And if you reinvest that into something else, you will beat Hollywood. Like, you will make that entire structure collapse because everybody's going to say, y'all don't know how to make movies anymore. These guys do.
Well, okay, let me
The
tell
minute
you.
that happens, there's no more money for these guys.
So there's a fight happening between these two worlds. So JoJo Siwa, I don't know if you know who she is. She was this young teeny bopper YouTube girl on Dance Moms, rotten brat of a kid, rotten mother. And she's grew up. Now she's come out as non-binary. She's got her female partner, whatever. Candace Burr, do you know who Candace Burr is?
Yeah.
So she, evidently when JoJo was little, Candace Burr was her, because she watched Full House, was her dream person. And on a red carpet, Candace Burr didn't have time or something because she was doing something else to take a picture with this kid. And the kid held it against her. But the real purpose of her coming out with this on her Instagram was because Candace Burr is a Christian and she wanted to make her look bad. And JoJo Siwa is a 20-something, lesbian brat.
Right.
And so this comes out, and then Candace Burr is, they have the Hallmark Channel, right, with all of these kind of sweet, Christmas stories.
She's like the Christmas movie queen. Yeah.
Well, so they moved that into, there's now a Christian version of that, and Candace Burr is heading this up.
I think it used to be the Great American Country Channel, and now it's the Great American Family Channel.
Yeah, something like that.
She's now like moved because Hallmark has gone whoa, right?
Right.
And so yeah,
yeah. So now they have like gay couples who are together.
I'm going to do my Christmas movies on Great American Family.
Yeah.
And when she did that, it was like, oh, that's so horrible. It's like, well,
right.
What's wrong with that? I mean, she's not telling people not to watch Hallmark anymore.
Right,
she's just signed a deal with this other channel because she'd have more creative control, essentially, is what this is.
Yes.
And also, like, she's a horrible person. It's like,
right.
Okay, this is not how people who are confident that their point of view ultimately is going to win. This is not how they act. No. Right? You don't deny somebody the opportunity to go do their thing if you think that their thing isn't a threat to you. Right. And it manifestly is not intended as a threat. I mean, just because Candace Burr's making movies at Great American Family for Christmas, it doesn't mean that people can't also watch woke Hallmark movies for Christmas. But everybody knows nobody's going to watch woke Hallmark movies for Christmas because they're going to be like, yeah, that's crap. I don't want to watch it. All right. I mean, like, that's literally what this is. They know that their point of view stinks and does not work. Okay. Right. And so this is why they go nasty immediately. Yeah.
So I just like everywhere else, I think there's this cultural thing that is happening kind of on the background. Mainstream media is not given any air to any of this stuff, but The Chosen and this alternative media is becoming the mainstream media for many people now.
Right.
And so it's shifting, and Hollywood might find themselves strangely marginalized, living, by the way, in a cesspool in LA. We were talking, one of our writers, and then we really need to wrap this up. One of our writers was in San Francisco and is reporting, Ellie Gardy is reporting on Gavin Newsom, what he's done to California, what he's done when he started doing in San Francisco. And we were talking about the homeless problem and the pictures that she took. Unbelievable. But when I was out in California a couple of years ago, Los Angeles, I lived in Pasadena for 3 years back in the late 80s and 90s and early 90s. And Griffith Observatory is surrounded by homeless people. Like, you have to wind your way through them. And these are rich neighborhoods, like going up into the foothills. And I looked up the data. There's 70,000. This was a couple of years ago, so I'm sure it's more. 69,000 homeless people in LA County.
Right.
50,000 in LA itself.
Right.
That's obscene. And so you have this, like, and, New York, I don't know if you noticed, is having problems with the rat population. And they're like hiring people to especially exterminate. I'm like, these places are literally being overcome by filth.
Yeah.
And there's a
You
physical degradation
yeah,
happening now.
like, I don't want to get into the pee and the poo because that's like the
Right.
poo is a problem in San Francisco. Like you get
Yeah.
homeless people and you get poo on the sidewalks, and it's but what this comes down to, and I mean, it traces back to, like, we're talking about the promotion of people who stink at their jobs. We're talking about an entire political and personal and um, moral philosophy that is antithetical to competence.
Yeah.
Right. And everything is about your identity and nothing is about whether you're any good. It's anti-meritocratic.
Yeah.
And it reaps exactly what you would figure from based on what it sows. I mean, and we're, like, it's inescapable at this point. Hollywood can't make a movie anybody wants. These publishing houses, crash and burn with every book they publish.
Yep.
They run the cities into the ground. They've run the federal government into the ground. They've run these social media platforms into the ground. Nothing works. Everybody sees their products. All of it is crap. People don't want to buy it. And so we have this, the evidence is there. And like, to your point, people aren't pissed off enough about it. My response to that is just wait, because
Right.
eventually they will, because it's not going to get better, right? The only way it gets
Or maybe
better
they
is
are,
direction.
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're just quietly voting with their dollars and they're like, giving up on the system, and they're just moving to places they feel safer. They're watching media where they feel safer. They're getting jobs where they feel surrounded by people that they can, feel comfortable with and that they support ideologically.
Right.
And
the great sorting is not just geographic. It's across the board.
Cultural.
That's definitely true.
Yeah. So, well, time will tell how this is going to be, but I would recommend that one of the last things before we go, if you don't know what to get your friends and family for Christmas, I have two recommendations. One is Piece of Soul by Martin Sheen. The second is
Fulton Sheen.
Martin Sheen.
Martin Sheen definitely would not have written that.
No, I'm just laughing. Yeah, no, not Martin Sheen. And then our own Scott McKay, buy his book.
Yeah, here we go. Boom.
The Revivalist Manifesto. Because the thing is, and the next book that you're going to be working on is going to be about more solutions.
But in the meantime, I have another book that's going to come out probably in the spring. I'm not going to give a title yet because it's a working title and we're not ready, but the book is going to be about Obama and how fundamentally he managed to transform America in all kinds of ways that were not good. And it kind of ties into the whole revivalist bit as well, because Obama is the one that pushed the Democrat Party and the left in general in a direction that fell far away from the American mainstream. And somehow they've not paid a price for that, commensurate with the actual damage that they've done. And the book is an examination of all this. And I'm in the process where I'm really just trying to kickstart it, because a book, well, once you get going, you amaze yourself how fast you can write a book. But that first quarter of it is a real slog through the mud. So I'm in the slog part, but it's kind of an examination of things. And like everything that I'm going back looking at the history of the Obama stuff is like more and more from a 15 years down the road perspective. I'm just like, wow. Okay. Because when it was happening, you didn't have the perspective, and like so much has happened since, but like going back and reviewing 2007, 2008, 2009 from a 2022 perspective.
Right.
I mean, I'm really glad the publisher came to me and wanted me to write this book, because it probably wouldn't have been written. Right. And, that I get to write it. I mean, I think it has the potential of being really, really a good book. So maybe we'll be talking about this for next Christmas's present for everybody. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, so, I think that what we talked about today is hopeful, because outside, the political machine, Americans are very resilient, And the political machine has been very bad at different times. I was just reading an article about how on the committee, on the Un-American committee, there were actual paid, KGB agents. Some of the elected officials were in the pay of the KGB, or at that time, I forget what it was under Stalin, but
KVD
and
GRU
yeah, and yes, something. Yeah, I don't want to say it wrong, but I think that's right. Anyway, but the idea that our government has ever been, super awesome, government by man tends to not work out too well. So, but Americans find a way around it and find a way to keep going. And I think it's very heartening what they're doing culturally to take things into their own hands. And all, praise goes to Dallas Jenkins, who is the director and who is the visionary behind Angel Studios. And we need more Dallas Jenkins. I hope Kanye becomes the Dallas Jenkins for music. Make your own empire. A guy like him can be free, and he can do it. He's certainly talented enough. But you might have to build it from the ground up. You might have to build, like, he wants to, have clothing lines or get into architecture, whatever his thing is. He can do it, I think, but you can't
build it from the ground up, because then it's yours.
Yeah, make it yours. And I think that's the thing, for people who feel marginalized, that has to happen. I mean, look what Tyler Perry has done. Yeah. He wasn't seeing media that he wanted to see. He created it. Yeah. And now has an empire. So I'm hoping, and he's also a Christian guy. So, another guy who's like not operating within the system created his own system in Georgia. So I hope that, it is hopeful. Americans are resourceful, and we're seeing that in entertainment. These big businesses, I hope, are, Teddy Roosevelted, and, we can maybe begin again and have a better, more federalized system, a fairer system. But in the meantime, there are things that we can do. So buy these books, share them, because any transformation individually makes a difference for the country, and it starts one person at a time. And so we all can do that. So thank you for listening. And to that point, subscribe to us here, share our stuff.
Smash it.
And also subscribe. We have the best deal going right now for the American Spectator magazine. Again, if you want to see the kind of media that you want to see, it costs money. And we want to do we have a high quality, beautiful magazine that we are doing that covers the politics and the culture and is trying to capture each moment from a conservative perspective. And we have amazing, like this new issue that we have what I consider to be like the definitive piece on China by one of our writers, John Jang. We have a definitive piece on kind of where the culture is going and an understanding of the political kind of world that we're living in right now. So, we have good stuff, and we need you to subscribe to support it so we can do more. And where we have a generous donor who helped Ellie Gardy, who's doing all this amazing reporting. Look for her. She's got 12 articles in the hopper, all about what the California experiment under the governor. So under Gavin Newsom. And we're going to hear more about him. I don't care what he says about not running against Biden. Biden, I think, is a dead man walking. So we'll see. So anyways, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next week. And the spectacle, it continues to be the spectacle. So the political world, the cultural world is the spectacle. Anyways, thank you for watching. We'll see you then.